Hey, I've just started my first live AMA. I noticed that Mark has joined. That's a great incentive to start talking. Don't have much to say. I'm going to run this like an AMA. So the best thing to do is add a comment and I will respond. There might be some dead silence in this, but don't be too alarmed. I'm hoping this works and you can hear me. The only one. Yes, you are the only one. The one and only. So Mark, check this out. Installed OBS and I've got my Stream Deck going. What does this look like? Slides. I figured today I'd talk a little bit about the capture tools that I use. What you can find is a view of me, the slide, and my desk. At the same time, I also can jump back to fully talking about what's happening here. Hi, Shivani. So Shivani is my niece. I'm trying this out. Hopefully this will work. I have things set up and I'm going to run this like an AMA. And if that doesn't work, I will move into just talking about a couple of points in my presentation or my book, which is now live and available on getthinkable.com. If you haven't joined, you should. You'll get a lot of the highlights in a 7-day email course, which I've curated to be the best content, most impactful content to help as many people as possible take ideas out of their head and to put them into their hands. Shivani, yes. Mark, you're amazing. Mark is in Sweden. He's doing some cool stuff out there, really cool stuff. He's a FUI master. I don't think he calls himself that anymore. But as you can see, the deep thought of today is ideas that stay in the mind are just half a thought. We all have this problem where we think, and things just stay up there. They just never go anywhere. And I think the greatest problem that creates is this imbalance within us, and that imbalance is mental clutter. Kind of erases some of our energy. A little bit of energy loss is not good. So I'm going to just hover. I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and wait for some other people to come on. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about some of the gear that I take every day with me, my EDC. So the cards are extremely important to everything I do. This is a place where I can simply write out and it's not always writing, it's actually sometimes, I'm not going to call this drawing, this is visualizing. I actually spent some time looking for something that allowed me to take cards like this, and those cards like this turn into cards like this, which end up becoming whatever you think about in a very tangible medium. I can't always walk around with a stack of cards, so I have a traveler notebook. You can kind of see that. It is a travel notebook. It's a small size. It allows me to take cards, carry them with me, and this can go anywhere, any place. There you have it. I'm sure this is really exciting stuff. But again, AMA, so maybe Ask me anything. I see who else is on here? Can't read from here. Oh, my other niece is here, the new mommy. So lots of interesting things have been launched, and I'm hoping that this will help people to organize their thoughts. Yeah. Mark, what do you think? Shivani, how about you? What do you think? Sonia, what do you think? I need more people on my live. So we've got slideshow mode. Okay, ideas that stay in the mind are half a thought. So here's the thing. As creatives, we need tools that help keep us in the flow. And a lot of the tools that we use sometimes impede our progress. So when we select tools, we should select tools that allow us to be fluid. So we got a question by Mark. Is the problem more a case of too big? Yes. How do we take, great question, Mark. So usually when we think about it, let me get into this mode here. When we think about ideas are usually start off they actually don't start off as ideas in the first place. What we basically have is a series of things that happen in our heads, in our minds. These are thoughts. These thoughts sometimes make little connections. And sometimes those little thoughts become really interesting. Become really interesting ideas. So ideas typically start off very small. They may be big ideas, but they start off very small. And when they're small ideas, they sometimes fall through the cracks. And as an example, let's take an idea about changing the front door. I have an idea that I want to change my front door. I don't like my front door. Then sometimes I think that the front door, I ask myself, why is it even there? Why is it a door? So anyway, this little small idea of changing the front door as an example becomes that. Now, if I want to, I can take that small idea and start to make it bigger. So that's the amplifying of an idea. Or I could take a big idea and make it a little smaller. So I think, Mark, your question about breaking down a really big idea is a really good point. I think our first inclination is to have a thought, think it's a big idea, and say, I don't even think I'm going to start it. I think I'll just leave that aside. No one else is going to do that. I can't do that. So I think the most important thing is to capture ideas, and that is sort of essential to the whole process of taking ideas out of your head. And capturing, this is the whole topic about capturing. Capture the idea, whether it is big or small. As an example, the little cards that I just put down, let's go back to some of those. So let's look at some of the ideas I've captured. Here's an idea that I've captured. It's called the personal compute constellation. We all have a constellation of things that we compute with. And I think, so for this is an idea which is going to try to make sense of that and create a framework for that. So I consider this to be a really big idea that I need to just still sit on and incubate. Let's find other ideas that we have in this deck. Ideas about writing and sketching. So this would have been a small idea that became still stayed small. I don't know if this is all exciting for you or not, but yeah, I think maybe that's the best thing that I can give you at this point. We are trying to take ideas, trying to take thoughts, convert those to ideas. Those ideas then become something that you have to either take a very small idea and try to amplify, or take a very big idea and make it smaller. So you need to be able to build between both. And the greatest and the most important thing is to initially capture whatever thoughts you have, put them down, and then you can start to process those ideas. Hi, Burnout Broccoli. Burnout Broccoli is a veteran of doing lives. She has a lot of content, and if you are interested in managing burnout, which I think we both are, and taking different angles of it, you should follow her and see what she's up to. So again, first AMA, any question is a good question. I feel like a magician trying to deal cards, but let's get back to the presentation for a second. So I guess the question of capturing, the question of tools that we use to capture our ideas is extremely relevant and extremely important. And that importance comes from the fact that when we make selections for these tools, they may either hurt the flow of thinking, the flow of ideas, or they may aid in. So I've kind of captured these few points here, right? So number one, context triggers. Tools should help you trigger the context of your ideas. So the tools that you use should give you some sort of an anchor for the ideas themselves. And I think what's really interesting is when you pick a card up, and you know, this is why I use tangible forms. You pick up a card, you start to see that these give you an anchor to the time in which that thought was created. I think it's a really powerful mechanism to get back into the moment, that you had that initial thought. Now, I'm going to take a second just to talk a little bit about digital versus analog. And the simplest way I put it is that the moment you take a bit of information and you put it into a tool that's digital, you have told your brain and your mind that you should forget it. Like, you write it down, you type it, sorry, not write, but type. You type it into some system, and systems typically are there to retain and recall and are optimized for that. And the moment you've done that, you've told yourself, forget this. I do not need to know this anymore. So how does that have bearing on ideas and taking your thoughts and making them real? Well, number one, if you want to develop a thought into an idea and really develop it, it's worthwhile to capture it in an analog form, because you will remember it. Your entire being, from the brain to the mind to the body, is now instructed that this is important. Because I stopped remembering phone numbers when the first mobile device came out. I only remember my parents' phone numbers. I remember my sister's phone numbers back then, but not anymore. It's because digital tools are a mechanism to forget, and their ability to find information, we no longer need to remember it. And that's a great disservice to the things that we want to put into the world. Yeah, so context triggers, the anchors, these things become anchors to context that trigger your ideas in a point in time. Number two, level of friction. Every tool has an inherent level of friction. I'm going to talk about this exhaustively. Friction is the thing that stops you from creating flow. We can't get into a moment if we have to pick up a phone and pick up an app, and suddenly I have to now, for instance, in this example, if I told you, quick, I'm going to tell you $1 million idea, you got a second to write it down. It's going to take you a few seconds to unlock, to find the app, to type it in, and then suddenly you've lost yourself. So friction is important. An index of distraction is something I'll talk about actually in the next slide. It's pretty interesting. Mark put something down. Let me just take a quick peek what he said. Putting anything in a digital format reduces it to the same level as every other single bit of information on that screen. You just don't forget it. It gets lost in the sea of everything else. Absolutely. Mark is pretty brilliant. If you've watched TV and watched any sci-fi, you've seen Mark's work. Okay, so he's 100% right. He basically said everything is the same. So let's talk about the index of distraction. Thank you so much, Mark. Let's talk about the index of distraction. This is super exciting because I actually have another slide that talks about this. So I came up with this idea that we should be able to measure how distracting a technology is. Okay, so number one, when you think about the index of refraction, this is something that I learned in physics, Orchard Park, many years ago. Index of refraction is how light travels through a surface. And so as it encounters a medium, light will slow down. For instance, if it goes through water, it slows down and then it kind of refracts. It actually changes its angle slightly, and that which changes the light to travel on a different path. Now, I felt that devices themselves have an inherent level of distraction, and this is what I put up there as a hypothesis of how you can gauge this. Now, Mark, you're probably one of the only people on the planet that can actually think along the same lines. Number one, the index of distraction is a calculation based on the multitasking and the multi-apps of a device multiplied by the data connectivity of that app, multiplied by the social connectivity of the app, multiplied by the notification system of the app. When you factor those, and there's probably a few others, in, you get an inherent index of distraction. I'm not a math guy, but I came up with this. Don't know if it makes sense. Now, let me give you a real example. If we were to take a phone, this is far more distracting, well, maybe equally as distracting as a tablet. A Kindle is far less distracting as a device, and then because of these factors. So in the end, when you're evaluating tools that help you capture what's in here, you want to reduce the level of friction and the level of distraction so that you can optimize for flow. Hey Harsh, welcome aboard. Let's see what else we got. So okay, that covers those things. So the greatest epiphany I have that I can share with you is that if you want to be creative, go analog. If you want to be productive, you should absolutely be digital. Okay. Now, if you've taken the course online, the email course, you'll know in the last harvest stage of this process that we have a gray area. And that gray area typically is I worked only in digital. How do I go back to analog to do thinking? Well, I think there's a gray area which you should be able to navigate by optimizing for flow and optimizing and not changing your systems that you use in that space. But for most people, think analog, think creative in an analog format, and move to a digital format for productivity. So there we have the key parts of capture. This portion you can actually download right now immediately from getthinkable.com. You'll find in the product section something called Essential Tools for Tangible Thinking. A lot of these parts that you see here are captured within this area. Typos are completely fine, Mark. So coming back to the tools I use, so this is a perfect segue. So what we have is slides above me. We have me. We have the visuals, the real things. So let's talk about this. There's sort of three things that you need in order to capture in a very fluid way. The first, and I call it the Trinity, the first is the pen. I use a Lamy pen for all of my capture. I love Lamy. Lamy is a very intentional design organization, and their products are just beautiful. I've used them for many years, but I've used many different types of things. This Lamy is actually a Lamy which I have, did some modifications to. Modifications are very simple. I bought aftermarket, you can see it, fiber tips. So these fiber tips are, I don't know if you can see, it's like a fiber tip pen. So I bought those and I have to basically cut it so they can fit in. Lamy doesn't sell a fiber tip. But anyway, the pen is the only mind-body interface you need. This is something that we've been using for thousands of years. First fingers and then markers. And essential for creating marks on a piece of paper. So that's the first thing. The pen is the first part of the Trinity. Burnout broccoli, yes, absolutely get those pens. They're amazing. All right, why? Okay, so why am I using these specific forms of cards? Well, I'm going to just read because it's a lot easier to read. I didn't know how taxing these are. The simple index card is a place to think. Now, I want to make a difference. I want to make a really important point. I'm not using this paper to record something that I will put away somewhere else for some future thing as a reminder or as an article to collect really nuanced information about something. Okay, so that, for that, I think if you want to capture I would say if you want to capture how your day went, you should absolutely start to use linear mediums like this. This is great. This is a cognitive surface. I use these as places to think. So when I want to think, I actually want to sit down and actually think about something. I'm going to use these cards to capture. And I may not know initially that I want to think, but this is what I use to capture. As an example, I've just launched Instruments for Ideas. It started off as a notation. I was like, the first thing I wanted to do was I knew that when I was creating this first issue, that I wanted to create a very simple issue that had some things I wanted to work on and share with everybody. Eventually I came back and I knew I wanted to think more about it, and I eventually came back and replaced that. And I started to clarify exactly why I wanted to put the issue. And then I realized I needed to create some sort of a form of a logo. So anyway, as a creative, I'm thinking about what I want to do. These are shortcuts to what's in my head. And I do not have to think about putting this into any format elsewhere at this particular point in time. I need to think more clearly about what draft of an idea that I wanted to form more fully. So these cards are cognitive surfaces. They're places to think and active think. They're very simple. If I gave you a set of cards, they're very intuitive. I gave you a set of cards, you can use these cards very simply. You can use these cards very intuitively. There's no effort in understanding or learning about how to use them. Simply pick them up and use them. A couple of really interesting things about these 3x5 cards. They've been around for hundreds of years. Entire libraries were cataloged on cards. The most amazing part of this is that you can use them to take, as I said, you take ideas, spread them across, and start to use them to organize thoughts that you've had over a period of time. All right, so there you go, the cognitive surface. The last part of the Trinity of capture is you, Mark. It's not Mark that's on here, but it's your mark. It's a term that doesn't get used a lot. But your mark is the thing that you leave behind on these surfaces. And that thing that you leave behind is something that is a signature of who you are. It's you fusing what's in your head and taking it out and putting it into the physical world. Typos and everything. But that's the mark. And as you know, we have folks that are on this call that are very familiar with who I am, known me all their whole life. They know that I've been using pens, but little and writing and drawing and sketching. But the most amazing thing is that I used to have really bad handwriting. And that bad handwriting, I used to have to write pages and pages over when I was young, like 12 or 13. I used to get my sister to do it, so my handwriting stayed bad. Anyway, your mark is something that gives form to your thoughts in profound ways. Because the moment you create this line or this mark or this piece of information, you have started to, it's hard to do both of these at the same time, you've started to influence the other. So as I make a point, make another point, make a line, draw a picture, or I write about something that's blue today, I'm investing my thoughts into this piece of paper, and as such, I'm leaving a part of me there. Now, as I said earlier, and as Marcus said, when we write and we digitize information immediately, it just goes into an ether of data, and it just there's no mark on those things. There's no mark on those things. But when you put it down in this way, you've left a bit of you in this point in time. And that bit of you, maybe not at this particular moment, will look different to you a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And when you start to come back to these things that you think that you want to put into the world, that you've shaped into these forms, you now start to inform your thinking from your own mark. So I think what's really important, the Trinity, the pen, you can find any pen you want, the card, and the mark. Those things become, the more fluid you become, you'll see, the more fluid your thinking is. But those things become the core essential part of your capture system. So, the interface connecting your mind to your body. And I tell this to everybody, graduate from sticky notes. I mean, you see Post-its everywhere. In many ways, it's a metaphor for ideas. In reality, it's a really poor way of forgetting things, because once you put them into those places on walls and things, it just, it becomes very, very abstract and very disappear. You can't actually hold them. You can't use them to synthesize. You can. They're not bad. You can use them in a group environment, but if you really want to go to a personal system of capture, the cards are the best place to think in ink. So the pen, an interface to your ideas from your head to your hands. I have spent a lot of thinking around how to communicate the term tangible thinking. And I think tangible thinking in itself is just there to propel you to take things out. So I used to say from your head to your hands, which I think is, kind of neat, but what really I think is really powerful is to make ideas matter. To make ideas matter. So if you see that anywhere, make ideas matter. What that basically means is that you take the things that are here and you make them matter. But matter can be seen in two different ways. Matter, as in make them meaningful, make it really important. Yes, this is what we're trying to do with tangible thinking, to take your ideas and to make them very meaningful. The other way of looking at it is to take ideas that are abstract and make them into matter, which is to give them form. So, from your head to your hands, love it, I'll always use it, but more powerful, make your ideas matter. All right, I think we're going to move on into another slide. Walk the mind. Oh my God, this is most amazing. I think I still have this literal card sits in my little vault that I take with me pretty much everywhere, right? So I can come back, I'm going to go back to my little notebook here, and we're going to go find that specific card. Well, you know what? We are told to walk 1,000 steps a day, or 10,000 steps a day. And what I would argue that handwriting and sketching are like walking for the mind. They really are. It really is. I think it really is. It just, at this day and age, it happens in a completely different space. It happens in a completely different mindset that we have to be in order to make that happen. Okay, I think that's some goodies. So now we talked a little bit about, or I shared a little bit about the tools you need to capture, right? The Trinity. Now let's talk a little bit about what you get when you add those all up. You get the mind mark. Not you, Mark. You get the mind mark. And what that is the ability to become fluid and to become expressive. And that's what's most powerful, most amazing, is that all of us could write the same words, instruments for ideas. We'd all write this on a piece of paper right now, and we'd all feel that when we looked at each of the way that we've shared them, they'd all look differently. They'd all give us a different feeling, a different emotion. That's the expressiveness of the mark. Now, we could all type the same words. They'd all be the same. Now, if you change the font, maybe it's slightly different. But if we all sat in a note app on your iOS device, you write those 3 words, it'd look the same everywhere. So let's keep going. So yeah, what's really interesting, very powerful about using the pen and paper is that when you're doing this real time, live, you're actually shaping the thought that comes out next. So there's a bilateral relationship between what is being left on that piece of paper and what you end up creating immediately. This did not come up, this wasn't created with a preconception of what it would become. So these things that we mark in these spaces shape the next thought that happens. So you might see something in the thing that you just left behind that influences the next thing. Now it could be a word, it could be a line, but it could also be a very powerful idea that's happening. Other reasons to capture, you get improved memory. So the more you write, if you want to remember something, the more you write on paper, the more you sketch on paper, the more you'll remember it. And additionally, the whole notion of understanding something. So studies have shown that when we type, we literally just hear and type. But when we typically don't do that word for word when we're writing. We're typically listening, conceptualizing, repackaging, and then writing. And that happens a lot faster. So you're internalizing what you're hearing and you're trying to make sense of it so that you could then, in your own hand, create a sketch of what you think you just heard. So definitely handwriting and note-taking require information to be processed, and the act of documenting forces you to synthesize. Visual concepts become a force multiplier. As I mentioned earlier, there's a signature to how you think, and that starts to become evident in the things that you use. Now, I think, yes, now we're getting into some really interesting stuff. Again, this part of the course is available right now on getthinkable.com. Go to the products section and you'll find a book called The Essentials of tangible thinking. I shipped this like 8 months ago, and it's available to anybody. So there's a difference between linear thinking, so linear thinking or linear capture, and atomic. And I think the best example, the best way of looking, let me go to a different book here. The best way I look at this is, we'll just look at this book here. The best way to see this example is when I have a notebook. That notebook allows me to think, and we typically, as we start to write, we're having a long flow of thinking, and this is like a serial set of thoughts that get put together. This is a very powerful mechanism to decode what's happening in your mind. And the whole mechanism of offloading your thoughts is essential. Now, sometimes we have an idea, and sometimes that idea starts off as a little sketch like this. And so, for instance, I had a thought around, before I picked up bring it over here. Before I picked up this thing, I thought, why don't I design my own? So I went out and I started to design my own. So I had my early thinking here. I then started to explore that further at a later point in time by linear thinking. It was a process of thinking. Now I came back at some point in the future and I started to ideate around how potentially this could look or could work. And I had all these ideas. I was able to kind of like sift them out. I had a Terry Crafted. He is an amazing leather worker, does high-end watch bands for the best watches just next door to me. He shared with me how he did his design, so how he manufactured. So anyway, I ended up building something. So this is the prototyping of some idea, some big idea. So you may write linearly and come back later to expand upon those thoughts in a future state. And this happens through a lot of my notebooks. Now, that ability to shift from a linear format, which is amazing, to capture free flow of thought, narrative style journaling, to come back to those thoughts and then to kind of stumble upon something, grab a series of cards and to expand upon those thoughts. That's a key part of this whole process. Well, I'm going to wrap up a little bit now, and I'm going to talk about this last point of view that I have. And that last point of view is that the systems that we're trying to create for capturing our thoughts come down to creating and removing friction from how we think. And we cannot replace this device. But what we can do is we can displace it. And there's a reason why these cards are the size they are. And there's because of our hands. These cards, again, 200 years old. The card itself, I think it was in France, it was invented. They're analog, they're handheld, and they're the only thing that can help us push this device away to favor a more present way of capturing what we think in a more freeing space. There you have it. Thank you. And I'm going to pause this portion of the talk, and I'm going to hang around a little bit just to see if there's any questions or any other points of view that are out there. Thank you. Okay, there's probably some lag between the questions, and please feel free to say anything. I don't know who else is still on here, but thank you for listening and attending. Oh, a Swedish naturalist, Carl Linnaeus, invented the index card. When was that? When was that invented? (1750s), yes. So I actually do have some. Yeah. I have some notes. I'll have to capture that in here. Thanks, Mark. All right, with that, I think it's probably worth my time to say thank you again and look forward to the next one.